Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay, yeah? Perfect, sweet. So, as we just said, my name's Evan Russell. I am a machine learning engineer up at Ulster University, partnered with Axial 3D. It's really good to be here today. Thank you all so much for coming out. My background actually started initially with a master's in physics, and it was only during my master's project, which investigated data analysis in the field of healthcare and tech, that I properly fell in love with working in the tech industry and healthcare specifically, which kind of led me on the path that has brought me here today. So I ended up being a bit of a turncoat, jumping from one university to working in the other one. So today I wanted to talk to you all a little bit about AI in healthcare, how it currently stands, and how the future looks with its proper integration. Now, people think of data-driven solutions as a new concept, as something that's come around with this kind of turn-of-the-century technology. But really, we've been using data-driven technology and data-driven solutions for as long as healthcare has existed. The example I want to use specifically today is that of Florence Nightingale, who in 1854 was sent to the front lines of the Crimea War to work as a nurse, where she spent 2 years of her life. Now, approximately 1 year into her time there, she began to put into place a series of medical practices and hygiene standards that were not really widely accepted at the time, but would go on to really shape our current understanding of healthcare. More importantly for our story today, though, she did something else. Her and her team of other nurses meticulously recorded every single death and every single cause of death of a patient that went through her ward. And upon her return from the front lines, from working there, she sought to get these results published. And she did so because she understood that that data properly represented the evidence that her methods worked, that her understanding of hygiene was better practice than what was being widely used. And she pushed for that to be published to make that widespread. This data here on the right is the data that she ended up getting published. Now, each of these circles represents one of the 2 years that she worked there and represents the number of deaths in it. The circle on the left represents the second year, whenever her medical standards of hygiene were in place, and the circle on the far right, the much larger one, that represents the first year before these standards were put in place. Green specifically represented deaths due to illness or disease, and red, deaths due to direct injury, and black were miscellaneous deaths. And as you and as people at the time could very clearly see, the deaths massively reduced, particularly in illness and disease, just by these simple methods that she put in place, such as simple things like washing your hands before dealing with patients, or separating wards based on what their problem was. Florence Nightingale didn't know what a computer was, but she was using data-driven solutions hundreds of years before that term, data-driven solution, became the buzz phrase that it is today. Now, this might not seem initially immediately relevant to the field of AI specifically, but there's a key lesson that we can take from this. There's a takeaway that we can get from here, and that is that just like how Florence Nightingale and medical professionals as a whole use their knowledge of the environment they're in to come to logical conclusions, they use the data available to them to draw logical conclusions. AIs can perform that exact same capability. They can take in the information from around them and they can define a conclusion from that. But there's obviously a very key difference here between the two, and that is that medical professionals are capable of using their training and their intuition to adapt to a certain situation. They can adapt to whatever's thrown at them, whereas AIs are very much so bound by the limitations of their programming. In healthcare especially, uncertainty is expected. A medical professional might be faced with a situation and they might not know how to handle right away, and they can do further research. They can seek out second opinions and consult other specialists in the field. But AI doesn't have the capability to do that. So how can we trust AI in the field of healthcare, something where lives are at risk, whenever we don't give it the option to say, I don't know, I don't have enough information, I can't come to a conclusion, and it's forced to take a guess? That level of human intuition is something that can't be easily replicated in binary systems. So how can we properly address this gap in knowledge? Well, I want to take you back to 2018, which still seems a little bit too close, but it was 6 years ago now, which is a bit scary. The FDA approved the first ever AI software that was used in a medical field for fully automatic use. And that was an algorithm, a classification algorithm specifically, called the IDX-DR. And this was capable of diagnosing diabetic retinopathy from retinal scans, such as the one you see here on the far right. The algorithm would either classify a specific scan that it's given as a high risk, in which case it encourages you to see a medical professional, or a low risk of diabetic retinopathy, in which case you should come back in another year for another checkup, just in case. Now, this system was fully automatic and was launched in some small limited use in America. And this was 6 years ago now, but it still represents the biggest question in the AI industry today. Is this system good enough? Can we trust this system? We're putting lives in the hands of automatic systems. How do we know that those lives are properly cared for and we're not just sacrificing patient safety for a more efficient system? Now, the algorithms at question, the FDA approved of this algorithm based on 900 total scans that they tested it on. They found that it was able to correctly diagnose diabetic retinopathy in 87.5% of cases. Now, this is a fairly good level of accuracy. This is roughly on par with what some medical professionals would see based on the quality of scans. But is it really good enough for us to be using it large in the system and leaving it unmanned? Now, this is the biggest question, really, in AI in healthcare at the minute. What do we do whenever this system inevitably messes up? Because it will misclassify something eventually. Everybody does. People aren't perfect either. What do we do whenever this algorithm or another algorithm fatally misclassifies something? Now, in this specific case, the FDA deemed this specific algorithm as a low-risk system, meaning that in the event that it does misclassify someone due to the general non-lethality of diabetic retinopathy and the fact that the system encourages you to come back in a year, it was deemed to be a low-risk system, a risk that's worth taking for the efficiency that it maintains. But this isn't really an answer to the question of what happens when something really, really badly goes wrong. This is just a way of skirting around that question, of circumventing it entirely. Now, one such solution that has since been proposed in the years since is the idea of programming classification algorithms with an I don't know option, with an option where if it reaches this classification, it can pass that scan automatically onto a medical professional, onto a doctor or a nurse, who can make that decision themselves, and we can put that decision back in the hands of the medical professionals, of the people who build these systems. But this isn't a perfect solution either. This is no longer a fully automatic system. But of course, it's a compromise point. It's reintroducing some of that liability into the system based on the people and taking it away from the AI at a little bit of a sacrifice of the time. So really, it's about getting that compromise point in these systems. But there really is no perfect answer for this question. Now, since then, there's been a general consensus begin to emerge in the field of AI in healthcare that, if possible, we should be using these systems to advance the workflow of our medical professionals, to make their jobs easier as opposed to replacing their jobs directly, essentially allowing them to work more efficiently so they have more time for what's important. So why do we need these systems anyway in the healthcare industry? Well, it's no real secret at this point in time that the healthcare industry is suffering from a bit of a general scarcity. There's a scarcity of medical specialists, particularly in various niche fields. In fact, one study from 2022 showed that 10% of doctors trained in Northern Ireland are registered in the Republic of Ireland to work within 1 year of their graduation. And this leads to a general brain drain effect, where professionals leave the place that they're trained or they grew up in to go to other places where they would face better conditions or better pay, and as a result, accentuating that problem for those who remain. And this all leads to a poorer and poorer clinician work-life balance for those that remain there. In fact, the same study from 2022 showed that 37% of medical specialists described themselves as burnt out at any given point in time. That's over 1 in 3 people in the industry saying that they feel overworked and underappreciated, which is a ridiculous statistic to have. And this whole thing is affecting a lot more than just our specialists in the field as well, as patients are seeing a longer and longer waiting list as a result. The graph here shows the number of people on the NHS waiting list over the last 15 years approximately. And as you can see, it's just been a steady increase that whole time. In fact, since the beginning of COVID in 2020, the number of people on the waiting list has almost doubled from 4 million up to just below 8 million. And it's showing no signs of decreasing anytime soon. Now, AI can't solve this problem. It will not fix every issue in the system, but it could begin, if used right, to alleviate some of the pressures on this industry. So far we haven't exactly talked about what AI can do for us in this industry. And there's a wide range of different applications, but I want to introduce you all to the idea of segmentation first off. And this is very simply just the pixel level classification of objects within an image in our case, such as CT scans or medical MRI scans. In the top left here, just to demonstrate this a little better, we have a regular CT scan of the maxillofacial region of the face. In the center, we performed segmentation just to separate tooth from bone, so we can see what pixels belong to teeth and what pixels belong to bone individually. And on the right, we performed individual segmentation of every single feature and object within this image. Now, systems like this allow us to build 2D and even 3D renderings and visualizations of internal anatomy structures of our patients, which allow us to see a better understanding of what exactly is going on there on a more personal level. We can better understand what the problem is for a patient than just looking at individual CT scan slices or things like that. But more so importantly for what we're talking about today, segmentation is a process that takes time. It takes a lot of training for medical professionals to be able to properly do this to a high enough level, and it takes a long time to segment images. In fact, in some cases, whenever you're segmenting multiple images to build a 3D rendering, this can take hours at a time. AI, on the other hand, has demonstrated a capability to be able to perform this task at record speed, far exceeding anything that's possible by any human. But more importantly for what we're talking about today, I want to stay focused on the idea of risk and how we can trust these systems. Systems like this open the possibility for a way to use these systems without introducing more risk. We can simply take the output from a segmentation algorithm that performs this task automatically, and we can give those results to a medical professional to touch up, to refine them, to correct any little mistakes that the AI might have made. And this way, once again, is a compromise point. We're sacrificing the instantaneous nature of using an algorithm for it automatically for ensuring that that safety is there, that the patient remains getting that maximum possible level of quality, and more importantly, that the responsibility is still firmly in the hands of the people and not in the automatic processes. One study from earlier this year, actually, published in 2024, investigated a comparison of the time taken for a fully manual segmentation versus this AI-assisted refinement approach. And this was segmenting vestibular schwannoma in the human brain. They found that on average for a fully manual process, it took just under 8 minutes versus 2.8 minutes using this refinement method. Now, while saving a few minutes might not sound like too big a deal, whenever we scale this up to the size of the NHS waiting list, any process that's capable of saving almost 66% of its time without any immediate downsides other than cost is an incredible feat to be able to have. And this is a system that we're seeing more and more use as a whole in the industry. By keeping the responsibility in the hands of the people, we can ensure that these simple, silly mistakes that could and do happen don't slip by as often. Oh, having a bit of trouble there. Bear with, sorry. There we are. So what exactly can we use these segmentations for? Well, there's a wide range of different applications in the preoperative planning surgeries, but the one I want to focus on specifically here, as I find it very interesting to show, is the idea of using these segmentations to build 3D models of the internal structure of a patient's anatomy, and then using advanced VR tech to simulate that surgery. That's what we're seeing right here, just a simulation of a specific patient's anatomy and the specific treatment that they would need. And this way we can allow our surgeons, we can allow them to practice in advance the specific personal needs that this patient would need in their process. Obviously, this wouldn't be needed for every single surgery, but for niche cases where the surgeon might not be 100% confident in a procedure they don't have to replicate as often, this could be a really useful tool going forward. So long as, once again, we remember that this won't be perfect. A simulation is nothing but an interpretation of events. It's what could happen in a certain environment. And with a simulation as accurate as this, as advanced as this, there's plenty of ways for this to be slightly off. The segmentations of the CT scans of the patient could be wrong. The hand tracking could be slightly off, or the model that we use to model blood flow going through the patient, that could be slightly off as well. There's plenty of avenues for error in this system. But at this point, we should hopefully be starting to see a theme emerge in this talk. And that is that so long as we don't put our faith entirely in these systems to just work on their own and treat them as gospel, they can be incredibly useful tools for us. They can advance our knowledge, particularly in this case for specific patient needs, for what they actually need individually. And there's a wide range of other applications that we can use this for as long as we don't trust it in its entirety. The key thing is keeping that responsibility in the hands of the people. So I briefly touched there on the idea of personalized treatment for a patient. The idea that a patient needs specific needs and a specific investigation into putting together an exact plan for their specific surgery and use case. In the field of surgery specifically, personalized surgical treatment plans have existed for quite a while, but they're generally not the preferred method to use. Putting together a personalized surgical treatment plan is generally very time consuming and takes a lot of time for different people to be involved in. We normally have to involve professionals from a range of different fields in order to put together a plan like this. And as a result, it's generally not the preferred method over the alternative, that being one-size-fits-all out-of-the-box style solutions that would work for most patients fairly well. But this is where the tech really comes to shine. The specific example that I'm showing you here is a personalized surgical treatment plan for a knee replacement surgery. The process is simple. We can take segmentations, as shown previously, and from those we can build 3D models of the anatomy that we need, in this case, the knee, the bone structure of this specific patient. We can then take specific measurements through key points of angles and distances, and from that we can build an exact tool that's fitted to their unique specific anatomy. In this case, it's what's called a cutting guide. Essentially, think of it as a stencil to use in the surgery to guide the surgeon for exactly where to make cuts, how deep to make these cuts, where to drill, things like that. The key aspect that I want to take away here is that this is a time-consuming process. Everything I just described to you will take a long time for professionals to do. But at the same time, every step of that process can be automated. We can integrate AI into these workflows. We can build systems that are capable of automatically taking those segmentations, of automatically building the models out of it, and automatically designing these cutting guides. But crucially, again, we can ensure that it's correct at every step of the way. We can have professionals refining the results at each step. And we can ensure that that maximum level of quality is kept, that we're not putting our patient at risk just for the sake of getting through the system quicker. It's that compromise, again. It's that idea that we can keep that responsibility on behalf of the people, the doctors and the nurses, instead of putting it entirely in the hands of the machine, but benefiting from the efficiency that AIs allow us to use. Now, personalized treatment plans like this have been shown in various publications to lead to much better outcomes for the patients. They lead to fewer complications during the surgery, quicker recovery times, and generally less blood flow overall. The only downside to these systems is the time and cost factor, which with proper integration of AI, once again, cannot solve these issues, but could certainly start to push us in the right direction. Now, these are just a few of the different applications that AI has seen and will see in the future of healthcare. But we are still very firmly in these early steps. We're at the early stages of integrating AI into this workflow, as we are in many different industries. And it's important at this early stage that we properly define how AI will fit into this workflow. Healthcare is fairly well defined, and people don't often like change unless they have to change for some good reason. People are often asking these days, is AI going to take all the jobs? Is AI going to replace all the doctors and all the nurses? And the answer to that is largely no. We will always have people at the forefront of healthcare. AI will not be taking our jobs. AI can and should be used as a tool in the healthcare field to make our processes more efficiently, to make our work more efficient, so that we can have more time to dedicate to the important things, the patients themselves, so that we can begin to take back a little bit of this pressure that's put on the healthcare industry from all this overworking. At this point in time, there's a general mistrust for AI as a whole. In fact, one recent study that was taken in 2023 showed that 33% of patients asked said they would feel comfortable knowing that their surgeon had utilized AI in the pre-planning process. Only 33%. And 44% of those that remained said it would be highly situational and they wouldn't feel comfortable if it was a significant amount of use. There's a disconnect between what the tech can do and how people view the tech. This is still rarely new. We're still on the frontier of AI as a whole. And that's a trust that will come in time, so long as we allow it to grow, so long as we don't break that trust, so long as we are using it responsibly and not using it to put our patients' lives at more risk just to speed up a process. I want to finish up just by talking about the one aspect of this whole workflow that an AI will never really be able to replace, and that's the human touch. You can build a classification algorithm that could diagnose any disease. You could build a surgical robot that can fix any knee, but you will never be able to get an AI that's capable of providing that level of empathy and compassion to a patient that they really need. Patients are scared. Patients are vulnerable. And patients need a person there to tell them that they're helping, that they're doing everything they can to make sure that patient is going to be okay. And it's reasons like this why we know that medical professionals will always be needed at the forefront of the healthcare industry. It's through properly maintaining that patient trust that we can better integrate AI systems through responsible use into our workflow, so we can better speed up these systems. We can perform our jobs quicker and faster and more efficiently, and we can continue to use these tools properly through proper testing and regulation. We can know that these tools are safe to use in the industry, and they will remain just that, as tools that we can use to speed up our processes, make our jobs easier, and make our patients safer. Thank you.